3PNR with Adam R. Welcome to 3PNR. I'm your host, Adam R. And with me again is Paranormal Specialist Stephen Mera. Stephen, how you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, Adam. I'm glad all things are okay.
Yeah.
And of course, unusual weather over there at the moment.
Yeah, Florida. Our whatever this is, our week of winter, spanned out over. It's weird because it's cold, it's hot, cold, it's hot. You never know what you're going to get.
Mm. Well, it's just cold here all the time, so we're fine.
So I watched your video on Project Doorway, and I got to tell you, it put me down a path. It put me in a rabbit hole, but a good one though, right? A rabbit hole that's grounded in reality and has scientific gravity to it. I was really impressed.
It's the whole idea about Project Doorway is trying to advance. I mean, from where we currently are in the subject of UAP and UFOs, to what might actually be taking place. I mean, there's a lot of unanswered questions. The subject has been static for God knows how many years. And you'd think that we'd obviously start gaining some ideas as to what this phenomenon represents. And of course, we decided to start conducting some scientific experiments and surveys and things. And we've been at this now for about maybe 6 years in now. And the first thing was to look at the statistics of how many UFOs are seen around the planet. Now, though that we did want to conduct a world survey, it's extremely difficult because, not all countries will participate or we can get that data. So we have to kind of rule of thumb as, okay, well, on an average. So we started looking around and we started getting statistics in. It took some time. And of course, when we realized actually how many UFOs are seen throughout the world, now taking into consideration, some of those are misidentifications, some of them are not true or hoaxes. However, probably quite conservative amount was such an amount that we have to question where they're all coming from. And the rule of thumb back in the 1980s was that these things are traversing the distances of space, traveling from other planets to here. And it was a very nuts and bolts type phenomena. But we're kind of transitioning now down another path, be it if it is interdimensional or extra-dimensional, is what some people are referring to it. The phenomena seems to be metaphysical in many cases, seems to be quite deceptive, and obviously can somehow alter how they are perceived. But we looked at the amount of UFOs and we thought, okay, well, where are they all coming from? We talked with SETI astronomers, and it was quite interesting because they're not really into UFOs, and they're quite open to tell you that. But they will say, that occasionally they might get a few ionospheric disturbances. But for the amount of UFOs that are apparently being seen around the world on a regular basis, we'd expect probably quite a large highway of traffic passing in and out of Earth's ionosphere. And they have very specialized sensitive equipment now to measure those ionospheric disturbances. And they're nowhere near getting the amount what they would expect to get, considering the amount of sightings are reported. So the biggest question was, where are they all coming from? Right. Now, as time's gone on, we started to look into the fact that, a lot of people are seeing these just materialize and dematerialize. And of course, when the Pentagon came out with the A.T.I.P, Advanced Aerospace Identification Program, and the proprietors who talked about, what that phenomenon represents, was talking about these observables, and there are numerous different observables, and these things are characteristics as to radar invisibility, hovering, moving at incredible speeds and maneuvers, and of course the traversity. Now that traversity, they put it down as transmedium, which is some of this phenomenon is seemingly capable of flying in space, or at least in a higher atmosphere, and through the air, just as normal aircraft would do, and apparently also underwater. And because we get those reports of the phenomena entering and leaving the oceans and around the planet, but also being able to traverse underwater and coming under the heading of USOs. But we do identify a fourth, which is the fourth observable, is to enter or go through physical things. We have this type of phenomena entering into mountains, into hillsides, cliffs, volcanoes, and that is something that they didn't really want to get into. Now, I talked with a number of specialists, scientific organizations based on in looking at the UAP phenomena, in close association to some of the people involved in the Pentagon. And they said, back in the day, about four years ago, they started bringing out this information about how these UFOs can be seen to move at incredible speeds, and of course, the traversity through three different forms: the water, the sky, the space. But it was hard enough just to get that out to be accepted, this traversity through water as well. So they didn't even want to get into the woo-woo, Adam, as you can well imagine, because these scientific-based organizations are now, for the very first time, getting some scientists which are actually interested in the phenomenon. And I have to say that's pretty much down to the Pentagon and the releases of information on that. But they don't want to just present woo-woo to them. So they decided not to present the fourth observable, which is, these things are going into the ground or into hillsides and mountains and volcanoes and things. They didn't even want to present that because it's hard enough to chew on that as it is, let alone, the traversity in and out of water and being able to move underwater as well. So they just thought, well, let's just present the three for now, and we'll put the fourth on the back shelf because it's going to take some time for science to kind of catch up. But I think what's going to happen is what I'm hearing in the circles, the inner circles ufology, is that this woo-woo stuff is actually part and parcel of the research and the experiments that are taking place in trying to fathom out the true capabilities of this phenomena. But that it's not shared so much. It's not being presented too much because, they want to be able to accept that, yes, we do need some scientific support, but at the same time, we don't want to scare these science guys away. And the more you dig deep into this phenomena, it's surprisingly, you start to find that there's a characteristics of this phenomena manifesting in key locations around the planet. Now, I first heard of this back in the 1980s, to be honest with you, late 1980s. And it was, I believe it's Philip Corso who'd released some information saying that he was he visited, he had a meeting somewhere, and he was told that the US government were looking into at least 5 of these locations around planet Earth, which have a trace element of high positive magnetics. And it is those places where, measuring over kind of 250 nanoteslas in positive regions, where some of this phenomenon is seemingly manifest. When you talk to the people living around there, they say that they see these objects quite regularly, and they just seem to, in some part of the sky, they just disappear and reappear. And then they go off about their business. Sometimes they come back to that location and seemingly disappear. And it's a bit like some of the stuff that's been reported at Skinwalker Ranch and a number of other places around the world, where you seem to have this cocktail of phenomena, but this manifestation of the UFOs and the dematerialization as well. So we've started going down that path as well. Okay, if they're not traversing to Earth in the means as we initially thought, traversing space and all these things are coming in and out of orbit, then, what are they doing? How are they getting here? Where's all these amounts of these objects coming from? And it's seemingly that from the evidence, I don't know if we could get into the parallel side of realities or other realities or dimensions, but they're seemingly jumping in and out from what we can figure our reality. And sometimes even skirting our reality. And when they do that, they seem to have no radar trace, but sometimes visual, but they looked to have a shimmer. I suppose it's a bit like the very large triangular objects that was seen over Phoenix.
Right.
And the people that saw these huge craft, they were all shimmering. And, it's as if that they were just kind of skirting our reality in a sense of speaking. So, of course, this is what gave birth to Project Doorway, and we wanted to really get into about, what are their capabilities? We know they're hypersensitive, hypervasive. They really are. And, of course, we know that they have a connection with the observers on many occasions. But we've started to find out that they're utilizing infrasonic sounds for their advantage. And it's also tied in with a number of other things. I mean, why should we get these hotspots of activity where you have these crossover points between the paranormal and the cryptids and the UFOs? And in some cases, they're actually directly associated. People have seen UFOs in association with cryptids, or there is paranormal things that have been taking place straight after a UFO incident. It's all very, very profound because we assume the cryptid stuff, the paranormal stuff is an earthly phenomena. But when it starts to link in with the UFO stuff, we have to start questioning, hang on a second, rather it's all off-worldly, or the UFO phenomena is more terrestrial than we can think, is more associated with what's going on here at Earth. And if that's the case, then we have to question how long has this been going on for, and how far back does this phenomena seem to go back? Though it has changed its face seemingly many, many times, throughout the eras, but the phenomena seems to stay the same. Just the mask seems to change with it over the years.
Well, if you think about it, like us, we need new cars. So you have to, when you're advancing your craft, the design's not going to be exact. It's going to have the same kind of, the way it was, similar like cars today and cars yesterday. They have four wheels, they have an engine, and overall the shape is about the same minus the design. So as you advance, different designs come about. I make room for that. But that being said, since I watched your video, it put me in this wormhole. I literally started just reading and learning stuff. And even Tesla said something about Earth and humans operating on the same vibrations. And it's only, then I read another thing that gave more concrete to it. Modern scientists are acknowledging that things that the ancients knew, that we're all in the same state of constant vibration. We're realizing this. I was watching this video where they're doing tests with sound waves, and whenever they use 432 hertz, the sound wave would always come in the form of a triangle, no matter how they did it. Always came in the form of a triangle. Somewhere in the 1930s, we went from everything being tuned 432 hertz to 440 hertz. Which creates a bit of anxiety, an emotional drag. It makes me wonder if they did that to make people need the music or need the show. They feed on it. It's mind-blowing. And when I read that study by Tesla about him, coming to the idea that humans and Earth are on the same kind of vibration, now I wonder, you have an advanced life form with advanced mechanics, quantum that is, and they've utilized, as you said, vibrations to not only breach solid surface, but to defy it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we look at some of the latest CCTV footages out there, there's a big hoo-ha about this one particular object that was filmed crossing a land at high speed. It's a black and white gun camera type footage from an aircraft, and then it seemingly goes into the ocean, but it doesn't leave a wake. And that's what's really interesting. And then it pops back out, and it seems to be not one of them, but two of them, like a duplication of all of a sudden. Now, what's interests me on that particular video is the fact that there is no wake, that it doesn't seem to show any disturbance in the water, as if it's not physically interacting with it. And this is what makes me think that some of these things are obviously have the capabilities of just maybe phasing out partially from our reality, that they're not actually physically interacting with that environment. How it duplicated, well, that's just, some of the strangest things that we see regarding UFO phenomena, true UFO phenomena, where I say that these objects can seem to multiply and morph and do some things that really we just cannot really get our heads around. But there are people in the inner core of ufology which are looking at this and realizing that there's a lot of other things which are connected to this phenomena. I mean, we started looking at the cryptids, disturbances, people reporting strange things happening to them whilst out in the woodland and stuff. People who have lived there all their lives, that know these locations like the back of the hand. And they traverse through those areas on a regular basis, never a problem. And then all of a sudden, one day they're walking through the woods and they suddenly are induced with so much terror and fear it cannot be explained. They just do not understand where it's coming from. Then they feel that there is obviously something in proximity to them. They're hearing something, they might see something which seemingly looks to be some type of bipedal cryptid which can't be initially recognized. But many occasions, confusion sets in. They don't seem to, all of a sudden, it's as if they're not aware of that location, as if like they've never been there before. They get lost, they get disorientated. And that's kind of part and parcel of this. But what we're finding is that when those incidents are happening, is that there's the possibility of these paraacoustics happening, these unusual frequencies which are generating the fear frequency, which is usually around about 19 hertz. And that's going to generate the terror, the fear, more so than ever expected. This is one thing that they often say. They cannot understand how they were filled with so much terror. I mean, they know that location. But sometimes these things, are there to frighten. And on many occasions, what I found really interesting is that these things have pursued people, and it seems also something to do about the fear. Just like poltergeist acts, it's about not supposed about the incident, but it's about the fear. And these things have pursued people, and they've locked themselves in their homes, and this thing comes up and it's growling and it's shaking the door handle. And but what tends to happen on many of these occasions is that when it doesn't kind of go to plan, and suddenly you are right in front of these things, there seems to be a little bit of a Mexican standoff. It seems that the people that are seeing these things come face to face with them, they just enter into a form of shock. Sometimes they drop to the ground, they don't move. That old survival sense kicks in, like small animals. If I don't move, they won't notice me.
Right.
And they just freeze in terror. But it seems that the cryptids, which are seemingly out to literally, well, I mean, by all intents and purposes, people are saying this thing would have caught up with me, would have killed me, well, God knows, this thing was huge, would have ripped me apart. That doesn't seem to happen. It seems to be that there's this Mexican standoff where they're facing each other. One's in terror on the floor, and the cryptid doesn't know what to do then. It's just like, okay, the game's over. I don't know what else to do now, but run off. And that's happened many occasions. And we're thinking to ourselves, okay, so it's about fear induction. So we started looking into fear pheromones. We were trying to figure out, I wonder if some of this phenomenon is somehow just looking for the fear pheromone or obtaining it or something. Because
I'll give you an idea. And we're talking somatics, right? When you listen to sad music, it will have a profound effect on you. It affect your emotions, undoubtedly. When you listen to music that like high-end music or music to make you happy, you feel that sense of happiness. I mean, we're all guilty of this. So if something's altering the frequency there, it could absolutely have an effect on your chemical response, I would think.
Well, absolutely, yeah, because what we tend to get is something that was referred to as the Oz factor, which was coined by a British researcher called Jenny Randall. And it's those times when UFOs turn up and then suddenly there's this silence. I mean, dead silence. It's just a profound, strange, weird silence that befalls the whole location just prior or during the incident. Now, it's not just UFOs, it's cryptids as well. That is happening. At the time of these people encountering some of these cryptids, they've said so many times that it's strange, it's weird and eerie. Everything just suddenly stops, as if like there's no birds, no insects, nothing. I can't hear nothing. This Oz factor type experience during the cryptids type phenomenon, not only the UFO phenomenon, but also identical in the cryptid phenomena. And I did look into the pheromone thing because scientists were saying, well, you know what, we don't have that anymore. We've lost it. The capabilities of the sense of human pheromones. We don't utilize it anymore. It's one of those senses we don't need, so we got rid of it. However, I came across some studies which were done not too long back. And what they did, they tested on two different parties. There was 5 people who were going to go skydiving for the first time, and there were 5 people who were just going to play basketball. And what they did is they put these small patches on them. And then afterwards, they put these patches into an experiment. They asked people to smell these patches. Doesn't sound a nice thing, really, but it was part of the experiment.
Huh.
And it was fascinating because they were actually successful. The people who said these are the people who did skydiving could sense through the sense of smell a fear pheromone that was in that pad, and could identify quite easily those that had actually gone skydiving for the first day, which is obviously, I can well imagine that's a bit fearful, and the difference between those that would just play basketball. So I can't completely rule that out, that, you know, when science is saying we don't have that capabilities anymore, I don't think so. That's true. I think some of us do. And I'm trying to figure out, you know, why should these creatures just want to generate so much fear and then just depart when the game's over? You know, I can't keep chasing you. You've fallen over. You're on the floor. I go up to you. I'm screaming and growling at you, and then that's it. It's as if they don't know what to do then, so they depart in a hurry. It's seemingly something to do about the fear, by the sounds of it. But then, you know, poltergeists act very similar, you know, about the generation of fear, because these are parasitic, and they seem to utilize that fear and that vexation and stress to create further phenomena, which usually people will witness, and it's a vicious circle which goes round and round.
You know, it's when they say science says that we don't have those, I guess, instincts. I think in the back of my head, our brain right now on Earth is the most complex computer on the planet, the most complex. And I don't think that we don't not have those instincts or those abilities. I think it's suppressed because as technology went on and we're using like phones and computers, we realize we don't need it. So that part of the brain turns off. Like the computer's like, well, we're not using this section. Let's divert the energy to a different section. And then speaking in terms of poltergeists and UFOs, both of these entities, one using technology to manipulate vibration and matter, another manipulating energy and vibration as well to even appear. So the one common thing I think they have between each other is they both use some form of vibration that's not calibrated fully with our planet and on our species. And I kind of feel,
which makes it really fascinating, because, you know, if we were initially thinking back in the 80s when we were told this is an extraterrestrial phenomenon, you know, why should characteristic earthly type, all right, okay, we say earthly, but it's still paranormal. Paranormal goes back, you know, for hundreds and hundreds of years, if not longer. And we're aware that these things have been reported. But why should it have similar characteristics to the paranormal? Why should it have part and parcel attributes across the cryptids, the paranormal, and ufology? And this is what's interesting, is because you start to have like a tick-off box, and as you're going through all these case files, you start to say, well, hang on a second, there's attributes of the paranormal here, and is in the cryptids, in the paranormal cases, in the ufological cases. And that's what makes it very interesting, because we're seeing these attributes of a cocktail of things happening under one incident, then we start to think, okay, well, you know, maybe, you know, we used to think paranormal is a very strange, unusual, but certainly a terrestrial type phenomena that we couldn't quite understand. But if these things are extraterrestrial, it's utilizing the paranormal in some cases, or these attributes to it, and somehow they go hand in hand. And that's what makes it very fascinating, because you've got two, and if this is an external phenomena, it's fitting in with a lot of the terrestrial weirdness, should we say.
Yeah, I agree. And they're really, the boundaries need to come down. I say this to a lot of the paranormals, a lot of ufology people, got to break these boundaries down. I had a phone call with a paranormal investigator off podcast because I was interested in one of his cases. And I said to him, I said, well, you know, in that same region, there's a lot of ufology, a lot of UFO activity. And he completely disregarded that. And I was surprised. I was like, well, how can you disregard that? You're out hunting spirits or energy, right? Energy-based entities. And I told him, I have to believe that they're one and the same. Maybe they're not directly connected, but what they do to manifest or come to reality is definitely similar, right? They're using a vibration or an energy to manipulate their environment. One with technology, the other with, you know, pure energy.
Well, I think this is one of the biggest problems, because I don't think ufologists are ever going to get a clear picture of what's really going on until you're right about bringing down these walls, because We need to look at the attributes of these other phenomena, which have been unfortunately compartmentalized away. We've divided these, we've put them in these boxes. And you're right by saying the paranormal guys won't deal with UFO stuff, and UFO guys didn't really do with the paranormal, but they weren't getting any further. And I think now, when we realise, hang on a second, it's about time we need to take these walls down. We're starting to see a little bit of a better picture that's going on here. I mean, we've figured out that these manifestations, these UFOs, when they are coming into our reality from God knows where, if it's their reality, interdimensional and parallel universe, whatever it be, they seem to manifest. But, you know, according to, you know, the physics, two things can't exist in the same place and time. So what tends to happen is that there's a disturbance in that environment, and it's kind of leaves a residue. Now, this has been reported in the past, and I don't know if you've heard of cases like this, where people have been driving down the road, they've seen a UFO close to ground or whatever, and the car headlights have seemingly bent towards the object. Now, I mean, I talked to a physicist, and they said, oh, it's impossible. You know, that can't happen because the amount of gravitational disturbance required for that would be something like the amount of the sun to bend the light. And as I argued the point and said, no, there's a simple experiment you can do with lasers, and you fire them through a ferrocell, which is like a very thin round lens, and it casts the laser to the edge of the ferrocell, which you can manipulate with a simple magnet. So I said, look, you know, you've got to understand that people are reporting it. The last case I heard of was 2015. A UFO was seen close to the ground, people passing by in a car, and the car headlights bent towards the object, which means there's a gravitational disturbance.
Right.
There's something happening because light waves can't even escape gravity. So we thought, okay, well, if these things are happening, I wonder if they're happening in locations where people regularly see these things seemingly materialize. So we went to a number of these locations, and we took some equipment with us. There's a little piece of equipment. It's known as a time displacement meter. And it's a small meter that measures time.
Right.
And then there's an 150-foot long line and a probe at the other end. And you place this further away to see if there's any differentials between the two. There shouldn't be. None. But occasionally you might get something like that, slight little disturbances. You know, it might only be 6 milliseconds or 18 milliseconds, but it's still something that shouldn't really exist.
Well, you know, 6 milliseconds to us is not, you know, it's probably different to whatever it's utilizing, let's say, a portal. You know, bear in mind, I read this thing about 528 hertz, the dangers of it, right? And that you're talking about an advanced species. I don't believe black holes are enormous. I think they're varied in size. And I think when you're manipulating space matter with vibrations and I'd say vibrations and energy, right? You're manipulating space-time. So you're essentially creating a small black hole when you're using a portal. So it would make sense that light would bend toward it because nothing can escape a black hole.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because from the studies we did in the paranormal and some locations, I mean, it's just been called different things, but if you put it down on paper, some of these paranormal locations, very well known for having activity in key places, seemingly might have something on the micro basis, such as a micro portal, call it what you will, where the phenomena is seemingly coming from, or you might say the main place of disturbance. And then you might have these things on a slightly larger scale where other phenomena is being utilizing these things, such as the UFO phenomenon, or UAP, if you want to call it that.
Right.
What we do see is a similar in the physics. What we do see, like I've mentioned before, that we had an apported mug, and we put it through analysis, and the dithermic reactions in that mug was crazy. And then, but we saw that before somewhere else, and it was in the plant chemical traumatology. This is when a UFO has been close to the ground. It's affected the plant life. And when you analyze those plants, the same dithermic reactions are in them. So it's the materialization of a UFO and the spontaneous materialization of an apport in the paranormal, utilizing the same physics here. It's coming from somewhere else, and there's trace elements that identifies it.
Yeah, you know, if you think about even our government, and it's been discussed, I don't know why people don't realize. Our government's discussing the idea of using vibrations for space travel. We've already discussed that. I saw a documentary on it years ago. And then I used to watch a show called Future Weapons, and there was a weapon that they were using, vibrations, sound waves. And one of the guys said, in theory, I could essentially go remove the matter of the wall without the wall being damaged. And that caught my attention, that long ago. And then you move now, fast forward to now, and what we're discussing. If you're talking about an advanced life form, there's no doubt if they figured out how to use vibrations, they're not going to disturb anything around them. They're going to go through it as seemingly.
We were wrong all along. I mean, we were naive to think if there's an advanced extraterrestrial or whatever they are civilization, that they've just taken our physics and advanced it. No, they haven't. They've come up with a whole different physics, which we overlooked. I mean, we're trying to figure out, well, how did he travel such vast distances? Well, they don't need to. They may have decided to venture into a completely different area of vibrationary phenomena, quantum phenomena, which just basically puts all our physics redundant.
Well, yeah, it's also a matter of perception. The way our computer, our brain, can perceive things differently, understand things differently. Like if you look in the animal kingdom, bats, for an example, can use the sonar midair, and their perception of the world is outrageously different from ours. So now talk about something that has thousands of years on us, and maybe extraterrestrial, whatever it may be. If it has a different computer setup, meaning its brain, its perception's different, then its physics would be different. I mean, there's probably an overall rule of physics. That doesn't mean you can't manipulate it, depending on what your technology is.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the biggest problems for us is that sometimes what we perceive is not exactly what it is. I mean, we have these accounts where the phenomena seems to just kind of get it wrong. It doesn't do it right. We have some, really credible cases where people have had contact cases, not the best of the incidents, but when they explain the crafts, it's like, well, it had portholes and rivets on it, and it looked like something from the 1950s. They didn't even look big enough, this craft, to carry these occupants, which I'm seeing. It's as if what we're seeing isn't quite what it is. Right. And if it is an alteration of perception and we be manipulated to some degree, this is where we seem to have this problem, because we not only do they have the capabilities to have be able to get them to be perceived to be not themselves, to be look different. It's probably why we have so many incidents where people are reporting so many different types of entities. And the varied crafts, but sometimes it seems to be wrong. They don't get it quite right. So the problem is that how are we actually going to work out what is really what we're seeing? Because during the contact experiences, there's a lot of misperceptions as to even two people together can see two different things, and that's what makes this whole unusual. It's quite mystical in a sense.
Yeah. Another big thing too, I don't know if I told you this evolution of my theory. When you hear Bob Lazar describe the inside of the machine he came across and how small the seats were, there was no knobs, no buttons, like it was seamless, right? And so I still believe that the smaller gray aliens are like a biomechanical advanced robot, and they could upload their consciousness to these robots. And which is why when they utilize vibration or whatever they're doing to manipulate the space around them, it's not having any effect on the occupants because they're non-biological. That being said, I think the actual beings themselves, and when the people describe the taller ones, that's their project, right? And now imagine, like, I always put myself in this position. This is a business now. We're watching Earth. It's our National Geographic channel. We want to see how they evolve. And other species come around, and we have to tell them, well, hang on. We'll rent some of our smaller grays, and you could go observe these humans just the same as us. But here's our guidelines and our rules on what you can or cannot do. And so they rent these gray aliens, and so that's one theory I have in that. Especially now when I watching your video, the Project Doorway, and I apply that to my own imagination, and then you read about some of the things scientists, and I mean scientists from years ago, not current, years ago scientists, and these theories they had that now later we're just acknowledging that these frequencies that our ancient people knew about, that they have these profound effects on us, right? And they have profound effects on the matter around us. So you mush all that together, you stick it all together, and it has a very, very plausible outcome for us being observed, how they're manipulating space-time. I think you're right. I don't think they do travel the vastness of space. I think they alter something around them. And like I said earlier, I don't think black holes are these large things that are far away. I think they could just be anywhere, and they're varied in size.
Well, I mean, you know, the whole subject of stargates and portals has been a bit of a, you know, when it first came out, it was a little bit of a laughing matter when people were referring to stuff. But what is interesting, you know, that we do have some scientific data now. NASA have actually announced that portals do exist. You know, they're just outside our orbit, between the Earth and the Sun, and these things are what as they stated on the NASA website. Some of these are sustainable and large. But the thing is, obviously, when they say portal, it goes from one place to another. And they did launch a mission, the MMS mission. I think it was 4 satellites, and there was rumours that one of them was sent through one of these sustainable portals and ended up near the sun's surface. You know, literally within a millisecond signal back from it before it was literally destroyed, but enough to get a signal back to say, you know, okay, this thing turned up near the sun's surface. And we do know that we've got 2 trained eyes on the sun on a regular basis, the SOHO satellites, if not more, which are monitoring regular that some of these objects are not only are not affected by the physicalities of the star, the sun, but can seemingly traverse through it or come out of it in some cases. Right. I mean, we've seen videos of it. And again, we start talking about this fourth observables where, you know, well, if they can travel inside into a volcano, then maybe they can travel very close to stars. You know, maybe it's just a matter of frequencies because, you know, if you oscillate something at a certain speed, it's non-physical in its nature to that reality. You know, I think you bang on when you start talking about frequency. And I think, you know, as time, we are just on the cusp, I think. I feel like we're on the cusp of change, of starting to bring in these new, well, they're not new. I mean, like you said, some of these are old things that have come from scientists and now they're resurfacing.
Right.
Because they're starting to realize, you know, some of these guys were pretty much they were right on a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
And now it's being surfaced.
A prime example, and here's where the parallels, I draw these lines with parallels from the paranormal to the afterlife to ufology, all of it. I hear this word commonly in all of it, and it's vibrations. I'd spoken to Roberta Grimes about the afterlife and the frequencies and the vibrations we operate at. Other afterlife people about it. A lot of paranormal people have opened their eyes to the idea that these things are operating at a frequency, that they're materializing with energy and frequency, because you need pure energy to create a frequency, right? It doesn't come from nothing. It has to have an energy source. And that being said, it's not far-fetched to think that an advanced race recognized that we could use these vibrations to travel. And keep in mind, this isn't their new, or this isn't like they're starting out technology. This has been around, right? You see the Tic Tac. Every time I hear about the Tic Tac and from 80,000 feet to 1 foot, the only thing in my mind is you had to do something fantastic to manipulate the matter around you, to not have you, even if there are robots in there, physical robots, they're going to explode, right? They're going to crash into the sides of these things, right? There's no way. So they're definitely manipulating matter.
Yeah, I mean, when I first came across obviously hearing about the Tic Tac, I mean, it was quite funny actually, because whilst the world was watching these gun camera infrared pieces of film from these Hornets, I was showing real video footage of a Tic Tac, which I got from the coast of Mexico, and exactly the same thing, really. When I saw it, I questioned even if it was actually manned, because of its maneuverability and stuff. But then we do see some of these objects move at ridiculous speeds. But that's only when they're traversing through, traveling at 12,300 miles an hour and suddenly take a right turn. We see that in our physical world. You know, that's, oh my God, how did anybody survive on that turn? But we have to also consider that they might not actually be really fully immersed within our reality. And therefore the inertias wouldn't be to be expected. I think there's a whole new physics really we have to go down here, and I think we have to start emptying some of the physics we know, to be honest, and start filling up the glass. I think that's kind of the way forward. Now, there are some scientists, Eric Davis, Hal Puthoff, a number of others, which are on that inner circle and trying to push forward, trying to find explanations. The first thing was really came to mind was the study into metamaterial analysis. Now, this is from suspected pieces of UFOs, and the report that came out from Hal Puthoff, which he analysed one or two of these pieces at his laboratory in Texas, said that it looked to be kind of 3D printed, but micro 3D printed. A lot of people coming out saying, "Oh, that's really fascinating. We can't print in 3D with metals." Well, no, that's not actually true. We've been printing in 3D metals for a while, but we can't seem to print at that micro level. I mean, the print layers on these are something like an eighth of a human hair. I mean, it's just ridiculous, and what it's made up of is a number of things that you'd never really dream of putting together. It's like going into a bar and just throwing loads of drinks together and hoping for the best and see what happens. And that's kind of how it was kind of described, because when he asked people, he said, well, why would we put those things together? It just wouldn't really enter into our minds. But apparently, when you put some of these things together, they react to frequencies. And what Hal Puthoff realized is that when you apply certain things, such as light, a light frequency, usually around about the terahertz frequency range, the metamaterials start to act profoundly. Some of them actually lose weight, completely lose their weight under the light frequency. Some of these things can weigh up to 700 times more than what they are thought to weigh initially. So they can manipulate its weight through the frequency of light on these things. And apart from that, they've also found a 4% isotopic differential, which means that we can find all these materials on Earth, what this metamaterial consists of, but some of them have an isotopic differential. Now, if I, for an example, if I say bismuth was one of those things, and we can see that bismuth is also on planet Earth, and bismuth is also on planet Mars. But if you dig them both up, they're both bismuth, but one has an isotopic differential, slightly different than the other. Earth's terrestrial bismuth will recognize it very easily, but that on Mars might have an isotopic differential slight difference. And this is what they're noticing. They're noticing that there's a 4% isotopic differential of materials.
Is that because there's no, maybe because there's no atmosphere of Mars, it's getting direct radiation from the sun?
That's interesting, because he said in his report that there was evidence to suggest that some of these materials are manufactured under a weightless environment.
Huh.
And I thought that's interesting. Now, is it the weightless environment and is it its conditioning of the manufacture that causes the differential, or is it utilizing some elements under its manufacture from not Earth, which is also interesting. Either way, though, I
see what you're saying too. By blending them, it would give it a more. I get it. It would give them different properties, right? Because I'm pretty sure at 528 hertz, right? Light and sound that's the same frequency, and when you start trying to alter that, like from higher frequencies or lower, what two different metals per se, it could I can imagine there being a very major reaction. Like let's say one metal can handle a frequency at 528 and another metal can't. It's going to have a counter, which is pretty much how you were using magnetics.
Exactly.
That's an interesting concept.
It really is. And I found this completely by accident when I was looking through the late Roger Lear, who passed away now, his final reports regarding the analysis of some implants which were taken out of people. And this, now noting, there's about a 12 or 15 year gap between Roger Lear's report on the analysis of one of these implants and Hal Puthoff's analysis on the UFO metamaterials. And what was interesting, what caught my eye, was under the analysis of Roger Lear's implant, it stipulated that zinc, I think it was zinc 64 and zinc 68, they had the overall isotopic differential of 4%. And I thought, hang on a second, that's exactly the same as the metamaterial stuff that has an isotopic differential of 4%. And I thought, well, that's uncanny. The zinc 64 and zinc 68 of what we're seeing there doesn't seemingly exist on planet Earth, unless through the process of something, the manufacture, that it's changing the isotopic differential somehow. I really don't know. But there are many people to like to just say, call it what it is. It doesn't seem to be some of those elements terrestrial in some cases. And I thought, well, that's a 15-year gap between these two things, and it's the same things that they're mentioning. And I thought that was quite interesting, that you've got analysis of an implant, you've got analysis of some alleged UFO material, and both are saying there's a 4% isotopic differential in them.
Wow. You know, that makes me think, because now you're talking about, let's even right down to the smaller object, an implant. And if the implant is utilizing a vibration, I think that's instant communication. Because imagine, it's not like Bluetooth. It's a little stronger because it can be detected from greater lengths.
Well, you're actually bang on there, because Roger Leir lists under the analysis that there were two frequencies coming from this implant. One was, I think it was 300 and something megahertz, 344 megahertz. And another one was 0.5 terahertz, which is a very high frequency.
Yeah.
Though that I looked at the megahertz range, it kind of fell into the range of weather satellites, the same sort of frequency as weather satellites use. But the 0.5 terahertz frequency, I found very little about. The only thing I found for listed in regards 0.5 terahertz frequency being used was something known as T-rays. And it's like, it was described as it's a piece of equipment that utilizes a pulse of 0.5 terahertz frequency to allow to scan the body and give a 3D image of the whole system. This is something relatively new and utilizing with equipment now. And it was referred to as T-rays. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because we are talking about the biological system here, and it's an implant. And I thought, well, that's unusual. You know, I really don't know, but it's strangely coincidental that we are talking about a biological system here.
You know, I was telling you about that video earlier I watched where they were using 432 hertz, which is what the humans and the Earth were all on that same frequency. And every time he tried to make images of it, and this is a newer video, it would show up in the form of a triangle every time, which made me kick out. I want to buy a speaker and start doing these experiments on myself. But that being said, maybe these recognitions of imaging is like, in other words, if someone has an implant and they can detect that person's vibration, the different frequency is how they identify the individual, right? Mm. Even the ships, maybe that's how they identify other ships at certain frequencies. Obviously, when they're traveling, they have to use a greater frequency that would manipulate the matter around them. But like when you see them hovering around, people are like, oh, these amazing colors, and it's using a vibration. I imagine if you had an object vibrating and the technology to do this, the air around it would start having an effect and it would light up. I would imagine that.
Absolutely. I think some scientists are pushing forward the idea that around us is this very close other reality, where we have phenomena who seemingly interacts with our reality. But some people seemingly have their own capabilities of just kind of stretching across to that other reality. I don't know if you remember, there were two women, and both have a unique experiences in regards kind of an 8mm old film cameras. One was Stella Lansing, and the other one was Dorothy Izzat. Both were women in their maybe 50s or 60s and had the old cine film. And suddenly they would jump up and have the urge to go run out and film. And when they were filming, they were seemingly filming apparitions and strange UFOs seen in the sky. And these were looked at by scientists, and they said, whatever's being filmed is there. But what is strange is that the phenomena crosses the frame of, because those cine film cameras were made up of, tiny little pictures on running at a certain speed, and the phenomena crossed the frame into the next frame, and that they couldn't understand. They just couldn't understand. But they did have the urge. They had some type of conscious connection and know when to go and film. And when they did, they'd film these UFOs. They'd film these strange people or apparitions. And this went on for quite some time. And it was interesting because both women who don't know each other were using these cine films to do this. And they just intrinsically knew when to go and do it.
That's a strange phenomenon. I got to tell you, the human brain, and I said this earlier, most complex computer on the planet so far, bar none. Some people, I really believe some people have different factors. Like, I speak to detectives, and some of them, when I ask them about their cases, they often say, well, there's a gut feeling. But that gut feeling is really an image that's displayed in your mind, right? It's an imaginary. You're imagining something because your brain's trying to work out a problem. And so some people just have this instinct. They call it instinct, but it's got to be some form of intuition, right? So maybe they're using a different frequency. Same for like athletes. Some athletes could just use supernatural stuff, man, but it's maybe they're channeling a different frequency. I said this a lot in the show too. There's a guy, it still blows me away. Got in a car wreck, damaged his brain, and could play piano now at a master's level. And maybe he's utilizing a part of the brain he didn't otherwise utilize. So these two, when they're having this connection, they knew to film. Maybe they're picking up a frequency that no one else can, and they knew to be there.
It could be. It does seem that way. It seems that some people just have that gift of being interactive with a very close, phenomena, seemingly very close to our own reality. But the argument would be then, if that is the case, that this phenomena is pretty much right under our noses. We might not be aware of it. We simply might not see it, hear it, or smell it, or whatever. But it doesn't mean it's not there. And this is this study that we did in regarding refined sugar and the alerting system, the survival sense, because we have a lot of people who want to go out there and skywatch. They're always interested in going out there and sky. And I've always said, yeah, that's okay, not a problem, but always make sure, be aware of your surroundings and that you're in touch with yourself. And they've asked, what do you mean? And I said, well, the biggest thing about going out and experiencing an external phenomena is to rely on your own intuition, which might tell you to say, hey, this is a good experience. I'm gonna stand it out. I'm gonna observe this, or your body's telling you to get the hell out of there. Because we do know that not all these encounters always end up good. There are a number of things that have happened in the past where, we have to sort of say, well, it's not all love and light, and you have to be aware of that. So what we did is we got people to starve themselves from refined sugar, because when we looked at refined sugar is a bit of a poison. It's not like natural sugars, and what it does is it causes your adrenal weakness so much that it disconnects you from your fight or flight response. So when you're out there, what most people are doing, they're eating candy bars and drinking Coca-Cola.
Right, yeah.
The amount of refined sugar in the system is just disconnected their fight or flight system. So when the body's screaming at you, get the hell out of there, they're not realizing.
Yeah, so, they're not having a response time that's adequate. That's scary.
Aware. I mean, you just don't know what you're going to experience. And I've said to this, when I go out and do UFO lectures, I always say it for what it is. I mean, look, there are good points, there are bad points, and people aren't aware because the strangest stuff that you hear, you don't hear about those very often, where people have been injured and worse, because they don't want to publicize that. A lot of people just want to gravitate to the love and light sort of thing. But some of this phenomena has its own agenda, and sometimes people, are in one place, wrong time, and and seemingly are injured. We look at the Calaris Incident from 1977 to 78. It was over 1,000 people were severely injured. There were 6 people that died, and each and every one of them, which was hit by this beam of light coming down from a range of crafts, which seemingly came from the sea initially, into the small town. It was firing these pencil beam lights down, and it penetrated the rooftops. It penetrated the homes. They couldn't run away from this thing. they learned to come usually in the early hours of the morning when most people were sleeping, and they'd just suddenly wake up in severe pain and could see a beam of light coming through from the ceiling and hitting them on the legs or the bodies. And whilst they were in tremendous pain, they were also paralyzed. They couldn't move. All they could do is just wait for the phenomena to end. And it was in severe pain. Afterwards, though, when they were rushed to hospital, they found that all these people that had been hit by this beam of light had hardly no iron content in the body. The iron had been extracted from their bodies. So obviously there was something going on there regarding that. But you know what? There were 6 deaths, and a lot of people were severely injured. But it gets pushed under the carpet. And it's not the first time things like that have happened. So I always say to people, listen to yourself, because the skin on your body is the biggest organism we've got. And it tells us things. It's just like being a paranormal researcher. When you're walking around in a building, and suddenly you get that feeling where your hairs go up on end.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's your body, your survival sense saying, look, you might not see something or hear something, but something's there and I don't like it. And it's telling you. I've said to people, come to rely on that a little bit more when you're out on your own, especially with a small group of people when you might experience this phenomena.
You know what makes me curious now? So that flight or flight, that's a chemical response. That's a vibration, right? You're detecting something, what a vibration essentially. So yes. It makes me wonder how many people that are witnessing this, because this really boils down to perception. Not on all cases, but the majority, I think. It's perception. Can you visual it? Or do you have that? In other words, does your computer, your brain, have the software to perceive this? And that being said, it makes me wonder, maybe that's why not everyone encounters or sees these paranormal, parallel to the normal objects and beings and entities. I think maybe that we lack the software in our brain to perceive them.
It could be. Obviously, it also might be the fact that, when children experience stuff like that, they act differently because the biological and the chemical reactions in the body are significant than it is in an adult. And if you look at the Fatima incident, there were 30,000 people. 30,000 people watched this object of brilliance of light move from the sky and literally swoop down at them. Now, almost 30,000 people ran for it in fear. And now this is taken into consideration. This is supposed to be a religious, it's supposed to be godly. It's something, quite amazing. 30,000 people almost ran for it. The ones that didn't run for it was the children.
Yeah.
None of the kids kind of ran, but all the adults they were suddenly induced with fear, enough fear to run for it. So that tells me something. That tells me that the body is reacting in a certain way. It's a survival sense kicking in. There's fear involved. But the children acted completely different.
It could be because imagine kids, when I was a kid anyway, our imagination is still extremely active. We're still learning. We're a sponge. We're absorbing information. Where adults have enough time to understand what's parallel to their normal. And so when they see an event like that, panic would be the first thing they draw to. Where children, it's a learning event for them. They don't fully grab it.
And what's interesting, it was the children that interacted with the phenomena, not the adults. So, that's what makes it very interesting. If you really study the Fatima incident, it looks to be some type of, if it was happened anywhere else, you'd be classing it as some type of UFO incident.
Right.
Some of the children said that the entity appeared to be, a vision of Mary, though that she never actually said she was. It was all came from the children's that, but definitely a nice looking female. But then, if we look back at these Nordic or Space Brother type experiences, when you get these, very nice looking females, how would it have been perceived to children that are highly religious in a location that, where the churches are, very much so devoted to Mary?
Right.
It could simply have been just something that's perceived. Now, what happened is that the church, the Vatican, was so disturbed by this event, and they were disturbed by this event, that they went there with the cameras and they filmed the whole event. They've got all the footage. They never released it, but they've got all the footage of what was experienced. And there was several reports that a craft was seen, and it wasn't always just brilliance of light. But if we were to come across a report that nowadays, we'd probably consider it something more ufological than something religious connotation. But because of where it took place and the mindset of those people that lived there, then it was bound to fall under that bracket.
Yeah, it's through the dawn of time for man. Everything that we see that's parallel to our normal, I guess we tried to explain it away with the best of what we know at that era, right? Because you consider the Egyptians, and they spoke about a higher form of gods and etc. When you look at their hieroglyphs and you watch some of these studies, it seems very similar to the reports of today, just where they're just basing it upon what they knew at the time. Just like this group are basing on a religious experience. That's the best they knew to explain it away then. And today, because of technology and social media and TV, the sky's the limit. So
I think you're absolutely right. It's the eye of the beholder. Depends on how it's going to be categorized. But there are cases. There are people that if you look at the Barrosso case now, this is a case that took place. I believe it was around about the 1960s, and it was a farmer and his brother. A UFO, it was seemingly on the ground, lifted up, and he saw two entities. One of these entities fired this beam of light at them. It hit himself, his brother, and the donkey, and all went down to the ground, including the donkey. His brother wasn't too bad because he was shielded by the donkey at the time, but he got full blast of this thing. Now, Barroso later, he was very nauseous and being sick, and they had to call doctors. Now, the doctors came out and they could clearly see that he was obviously in some form of distress, and he was starting to experience pain, but they couldn't find the reasons why he was experiencing pain. Now, over a period of just a few years, what happened to Barroso was that he went backwards in his mind. His body aged forward as normally, though that aged quicker than normal because he seemed to look like he'd aged 15 years in the 3 years that he went on to survive. His hair went suddenly grey and he became very wrinkly. But what was very interesting is that his mind went backwards to the point where he was like a teenager and then a very young child, to like becoming a baby and not being able to converse with people, couldn't feed himself, and then eventually passed. Now, there was a number of scientists and a number of doctors, and they took him to one of the major hospitals, and there was at least 12 different scientists there trying to figure out what the hell had happened to this guy. And I've gone through those reports, and they've absolutely no idea. They couldn't find anything to find the reasons why his body had aged so fast, but his mind had literally gone backwards. Whatever he had experienced, and whatever that thing was that hit him, certainly diminished his life. His brother was never really the same afterwards, neither, yet he did survive. But rarely would he ever talk about the incident. He was quite fearful about it. But you do get those profound cases. There was one in Crab Island as well, where somebody was shot from a beam of an object, and it literally, he put a 3-inch hole through him, but he did survive. So these cases I do mention because, like I say, we don't know. We don't know if some have a certain agenda or not. And when you're witnessing a light in the sky and you want it to come down and make contact with you, who knows? Who knows right. what we could be letting ourselves in for? And so I've always mentioned to people, be alert.
It's like welcoming the conquistadors with open arms without knowing.
Yeah. It is actually. I've said this many times to people. Now, I was in Arkansas, and I was doing this lecture, and they asked me to come and lecture on UFOs. Now, I would presented my traditional UFO lecture, which I would do, which shows the positive sides and shows the different theories and the different accounts of the incidents where there's been evidence, and of course some of the other things which aren't so pleasant. And I was very surprised, how many people were really upset. I remember a woman coming on to me afterwards who was very, very upset and said, look, she's just introduced her daughter to this phenomenon. She's 12, by the way, her daughter. she's just introduced her daughter to this phenomena. And of course, my lecturers made her concerned, and she was quite upset about it. But I think it's important for people to realise, that you don't necessarily have to introduce your family to it, because the problem is with this thing is that they can be very deceptive, as to what's their achievement, what do they want to do at the end of it. And I think I don't think I'd ever introduce my daughter to this phenomenon, because I'd be a little bit worried as to what really did he want to do.
Right.
And of course, it didn't go down very well. Other places, yeah. So there are certainly key areas just in the States where the belief system is significant, so significant that they're quite happy to introduce their smaller, the daughters or the sons to this phenomenon.
People, here's what humans fail to understand, right? Let's put this into perspective of human beings. When we're observing animals in the wild, and typically we will observe animals at a distance, we'll record them, we'll make a documentary. But if one of those animals have a genetic difference that we find unique, it's going to go under the knife, whether we care about the animal or not. We're going to want to, it's just the facts. So whether they're benign or not, if they're here to observe us, if you introduce your daughter and she happens to have something really unique about her, they're going to want to dig deeper and find out why.
Absolutely.
That's a dangerous idea in a sense, right?
It is. What's interesting is that, when we do the surveys and start looking at where these key areas might be, we did put some to the test, of course, but we had to draw all the statistics in first, utilizing two different satellites in orbit, one for gravitational anomalies and another one that looks for positive magnetic regions. And we cross-checked that against some of the most significant UFO experiences that have been documented over the last, say, 60 years. And we were really surprised to find how many there were in regions above, say, 250 nanoteslas of a positive region. Enough to say, something is connected somehow here. Yeah. And it was surprising, actually. We also found that these positive regions stretch right across the national parks. And there have been some strange activity in those parks over the years, especially with people going missing. So we started looking at them, and we thought to ourselves over a period of time, okay, if this is the case, then we should be able to kind of pinpoint a location on the map and put a pin in it and say, okay, this is a place where we need to go, because it's extremely potent positive magnetic region. If we go there, are we going to experience phenomena? So we decided, to put it to the test, and we headed off to Arizona, the deserts of Arizona, to a key location where it was literally off the scale in positive magnetic regions. And we got there, and we set up cameras and all sorts of things. And we were sat under a blanket of stars. It was a beautiful night, and there was nothing. It was very quiet, but there was absolutely nothing. So we'd give it a good couple of hours, and we thought, well, it's something doesn't seem to add up. So we decided to pack away the cameras into the trunk. As soon as we closed the trunk, bang, this thing appeared. And it was in 150 yards away in the sky. It was a close encounter. And it was full of light. It was like arc as well light. It was absolutely beautiful to look at. Purples and reds and greens and blues, and beautiful to look at. And it was completely silent. And then it wasn't moving when it appeared. It's as if it had been there all along, to be honest with you, and just literally switched a button and, hey, presto, I appear. But it was perfectly timed at the time. They didn't obviously want us to film them or photograph them or whatever, but as soon as we shut the trunk and all this equipment in there, bang, they appeared. And it sat there in the sky motionlessly for about 15, 20 seconds. And then it slowly moved and did a circular arc around us. And it was firing 3 different pulses of light. Boom, boom, boom. And then it would move a little bit more, then boom, boom, boom. And we realized, obviously, that maybe there was some form of communication by light going on here. But my colleague said to me, he looked over me and he said, I think it's our cue. And I usually follow him because he's more tuned than I am in regarding, should we depart? And we did. I'll be honest with you, we did. We got out of there. We'd done what we wanted to do, is to prove that, yes, some of these locations, which are pretty much out in the middle of nowhere, but very potent positive regions, are areas where they're seemingly interested in. So it proved to our point that yes, there's something to it. But then we started talking with some of the science guys, and it was purely by chance we came across this. It was a hospital ward, and they'd started installing these new doors, and they were on recovery wards. So you come out your operation, you get put on a ward, and there's only one entrance and exit to this ward, and this is through this one particular door, which has a positive magnetic current going round it. And we thought that's interesting. So we started trying to do a bit of digging and find out why they're doing this. And the doctors said to us, and the guys said, well, the new doors, the recovery doors, they're called, they go into recovery suites. And it stops the possibility of bacteria crossing. Bacteria doesn't like positive magnetics. Oh, that's interesting, I said. And he said, yeah. He said, but they have a problem crossing it, so they don't take care to this. So it helps regarding that ward because, with bacteria entering or leaving it. And I thought to myself, well, if this is really potent positive magnetic regions, these things might be seemingly manifesting in key areas where it's low bacterial levels and departing at places of low bacterial levels. And it reminded me of having a scrub up before you go into an operation, when you put your gloves on and stuff.
Right.
You enter into that location all nice and clean, and then when you vacate, you enter it and you all clean down again. I mean, maybe, if these things are coming through in key locations of very low bacterial levels, then that might be a reason why they actually are doing so. So we started looking into those negative areas of reason because we thought, okay, well, what's going on in the negatives? What's going on the opposite side of these? I mean, the plus 250, 300 nanoteslas of positive magnetic region. What's going on in the opposing, the minus 250 and 300? These are areas of very dark blue to black. So we started looking at those locations, and what we did is find almost immediately that there seems to be a correlation between high crime levels, high amounts of suicide in these locations where these negative regions are. And we thought, oh, that's interesting. I wonder if there's somehow living in those locations over a long period of time, such as may affect the psyche of individuals in regarding crime and illness and suicides and those sort of things. And we found that, there's quite a number of places which have been purposely built on negative regions. I mean, if you look at Los Alamos Labs, for one, that's in a very potent negative region. But when you do the studies there, they have a huge amount of suicides at Los Alamos Labs. And I wasn't aware of that until we started digging and finding out. And then we started to realize, hang on, something's a bit strange here. Over 70% of military establishments that deal with weapons, things that are used as weapons in war or whatever,
right,
have been relocated. Over 70% of them have been relocated to lead to areas of negative magnetic regions. And I thought, why is that? Why take it from there and build it and construct things in a negative magnetic region? And that really got my mind going then, because I'm thinking, what the hell's going on here? That can't be by chance, surely. Over 70%. Some of them have been taken down and relocated to those areas. I started to think, well, I mean, is this something to being in a negative region when you're creating negative things? I don't know.
I think it drives. It starts to drive humans to be more competitive. Like, I was just reading this, by the way, that the original 432 hertz that we would have everything attuned to kept people on an even keel. And somewhere in the 1930s, they changed it to 440. And that was, I think, I'm not sure of it, but I think that's to make people more reliant on, say, medication, doctors, and it's just, I feel like if you put someone in a negative environment, that's the competitive edge in people come out, that more aggressive individual. And that would make sense for military installments to be in those areas.
It was, yeah. It was, you know, it wasn't the things that it was always associated to sort of weapon manufacturing and, you know, things to do with war, to be honest with you.
Right.
And I was surprised to see how many, and some have actually been purposely relocated into these negative areas, very potent negative regions. I thought, well, there must be something. There must be some reason for that, I'm thinking to myself, you know. But of course, you know, it seems that you get, in those negative regions, you also can get some really dark phenomena, things like, you know, things that have been seen on the ground, which are shadow beings and things that are not of a nice nature. Those have been reported in those locations of negative magnetic anomalies. But the positive ones, there seems to be more associated to the manifestation of UFOs or cryptids, areas of heightened amounts of paranormal phenomena, and of course those strange missing disappearances of people, which you just, you know, cannot even fathom how to understand what the hell's going on there. Those areas are also in these potent positive magnetic regions. So we thought, okay, well, you know, does this just apply to Earth? Okay, well, we do know those satellites have also scanned the entire surface of the moon and the sun. So we thought, okay, so what's going on the moon then? You know, I mean, the moon, for a start, here's the biggest problem straight away from the research we did. The moon doesn't have a magnetic field according to all the science. Therefore, it shouldn't have any magnetic anomalies, be it positive or negative. Now, there is on the dark side of the moon, there's a scatter very close together of positive, very potent positive magnetic regions. It's in a tiny location on the dark side of the moon for some reason, and we don't know what it is. Now, according to the national science scientists who we talked with, they said it shouldn't exist because the moon doesn't have magnetic fields, so they can't understand it. Neither does the moon have these type of properties to generate, So we thought, okay, that's interesting. So we started to map the location of where these positive magnetic regions were on the dark side of the moon, and we realized that it's the exact same location that Apollo 16 flew over. Now, Apollo 16 did a trip right round the moon, passing over the dark side, and then we'll head back to Earth. Now, what's interesting is that during the trip of Apollo 16, as they were traveling over that location, we've got it on the map, we can see where they literally traveled right over that anomaly. They picked up some strange recordings. Now, the recordings, which were recorded on their equipment, NASA eventually got hold of them when they transmitted them back and buried them for 40 years because they didn't want that information out. What was being recorded there was a Schumann resonance, which means that there's an artificial magnetic field being generated on the dark side of the moon. And they didn't want people to know that. And it's there. We've got the statistics, we've got the graphs, we've got the details. It's all there. It's been scanned. They didn't hide the scanning. We got hold of it and we could map that and we can say, okay, we know the location. That's exactly where Apollo 16 flew over when they recorded the Schumann resonance. Schumann resonance shouldn't have a Schumann resonance. There's no magnetic field. So there's obviously an artificial magnetic field being generated on the dark side of the moon at that location. So that's the query. Hang on a second. What's going on there?
Which would make it
purely by just looking at the mapping of what they've done.
That's a fantastic location for like anyone that's visiting. That's where they could set up shop because we're not observing it, right?
That is the place, you know. And it'd be the only thing the moon is missing for ideal living there is a magnetic field,
and they've created one. Yeah.
I mean, and it. You know, we've got the plans, we've got the images, everything. We can tell you the size of these things. They were flying over at the time. We've got the recording. When NASA actually released the recordings eventually, they didn't make a big fuss about it. They just dropped it into some archive and thought they'd try and bury it. Of course, people eventually thought, okay, I hadn't forgotten about that. It was 40 years ago. I'm going to get it on the FOIA. And they did. And we got all of that recording. And we've got that, we got the sounds, the recorded sounds of the Schumann resonance coming from the dark side of the moon. So we do know that something was going on there. So they did map the moon. They did map the sun. But the sun's a massive amount of magnetic anomalies, as you can well imagine. But It's interesting to note, though, how many UFOs or strange craft seemingly are associated with coming out of the sun. These SOHO satellites have been recording them on a regular basis every single day now.
On that subject, all right, one thing first. Private industry, Bezos, Elon, I challenge you to go to the moon, dark side of the moon, and document. I challenge you, because we know the government's not going to do it, so I challenge you. To the sun now, something happened. I was unaware of this until recently. Some observations are made, and they shut down the observatories. Did you hear that?
Oh, yes.
What was that about?
Yeah, I don't know. Something really happened. I mean, I was in talks with a woman who claimed that she recorded some strange stuff that was coming out from the sun. And she sent me this photograph, what looked to be like hundreds of these very large craft coming out of the sun. And I didn't know what to do with it, to be honest with you. I looked at it and I thought, what the hell is that?
It's hard to look into, because this isn't like some sort of conspiracy or rumor. This happened. Like, the government shut them down. No explanation.
It's significant for them to have done so. And I was wondering why all these observatories which monitor the sun? Now, not all observatories do that. They specialized equipment monitoring.
Well, the observatory that watches the sun, right? That specific one I'm talking about, that one in particular got shut down. And the guy that was on there discussing it was, it sounded to me like they told him, don't speak of this. And they legitimately, they suppressed the information, and that's it. We don't know anything else.
Yeah, well, there was I don't know if something was seen. But they just didn't want people to be able to see what was happening, or something was going on. I really don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to dig information on it.
Yeah, it was never resolved. That it kind of was brushed under the carpet, like many other things do. But you had to say it was significant. It's a major deal when you're going to do something like that. There's plenty of staff there, they can all talk and that sort of thing, but no one was talking. That's really interesting. That's
got me out of all things. Like, maybe, I don't know. Maybe it's not alien related. It could be like, oh, well, the sun's about to do a big burst and we're all done. Like, I can understand them wanting to calm people down from hysteria, but it has to be a fantastic reason that they would suppress the info.
It is, I mean, I think over the years now we've become to more question about things. I mean, if we just go back, say, for instance, at least 20 years. They actually sent a nuclear rocket, didn't they, to the moon, and they blasted the hell out of a crater. I don't know if you remember that. But
no, that's crazy. That's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, but they sent a nuclear bomb to the moon and blew up this crater. What the hell was they blowing up there? Apparently they said, oh, it's just a test, don't worry. And nobody said anything about it. And I thought, what? What the hell is all that about,
I saw a video, Steve, with, it was... I was just talking about it recently, because I'm so new to a lot of these topics that I didn't even know about some of these videos. But in this video, it's definitely like either a space station. I think it's a space station, but it's outside Earth's atmosphere, and it's observing an object just floating through space. And then it legitimately stops where it is and goes about 45 degrees the other direction instantly. And then you see like a beam or something shoot right where it was. And I still have not got a good explanation from that. I have to dig into that.
I do think that we do have some very special tech out there.
Oh, indeed.
But the problem is, I think that they have to be in a location where, the average person who can walk into a shop now and buy a pretty decent telescope would see these things. So, I have to question where they're hiding them, where are they going to go? I mean, if you've got some of these crafts, then I guess you'd have to keep them out of sight from people, because we all can go and get hold of a pretty decent telescope, and eventually someone's going to start seeing these things and photographing them and whatnot. So if they do have them, then where are they?
Well, like I said, now we have private industry going to space, and I think that's why they're spoon feeding so many. I guess they're going to call it disclosure. Well, I will call it that if you can call it that. It's really safe, but I think they're spoon feeding it a little faster, because as private industry goes up, they're not going to not say anything. Like Jeff Bezos, and I said this before, if he gets that on video, it's going viral. and he'll make a channel out of it. He doesn't care. He has no reason to suppress that information. All he's going to say is, let me contact these aliens, and how do I get Amazon on their planet?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of things moving in that direction. I mean, it kind of kick-started with all the Space Force coming on. I mean, they only announced probably Space Force because we've already got Space Force. So at some stage, you're going to have to kind of bring us up to speed, tell us what they've already got. So Space Force initiated, which they probably had for a long time anyway. And then, of course, you know, we have the information going forward. We had the whole thing about, you know, from the Pentagon about the UAPs. Then we have Avi Loeb from the Galileo Project, who's talking about this strange, what looked to be a very elongated kind of meteorite or something which came out of our system into our system. When he's on his lectures, he's saying that there's evidence to support that this thing changed its speed, changed its direction, and now there's even talking about the possibility that there may have even been some signals from this thing. So it was, what he's saying is an extraterrestrial source or something of intelligence.
It could be a surveyor, right? Like, imagine what.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, I think that some of these things are literally planted inside these rocks and things, you know, and they because it shields them from the unusual debris that you have from flying through space, you know, because, you know, I remember Richard Hoagland was saying, you know, even in space, you've got these micro meteorites which are traveling at thousands of miles an hour.
You realize, when I was a kid, Steve, I remember thinking, like, why can't we put satellites and find some way to put them on comets and they could travel wherever and we could document, you know, as much as we want, you know, with no fuel. So
you don't need to. They'll go across their path. I mean, of course, they may find a way of being able to alter its trajectory and stuff. But you know what? How's it going to shield itself from these micro meteorites all the time?
Right.
Well, you know what? Or you can put it inside if they wanted to. You know, and this might seemingly have been the case. It's a perfect location to be sheltered from the vast dangers of micrometeorite bombardment, you know, if it's inside some of these objects that are flying past. And he's doing a lot of lectures now, and he's taking quite considerably, you know, the Galileo project is a very serious project. And they've put the evidence forward, and, well, it's not been knocked. It's been accepted, actually, that, you know, there's obviously something quite unusual about this. Tie that in with, you know, with your Space Force announcements, now the UAP disclosure stuff that's coming forward, and any other little things which are going to nip through through these lines over the next year or two, be it the UFO task force or other things. We are headed in the right direction, but I think there's still that great effort to kind of just, you know, look at this hand and not this one, because it's like, well, this is all the UAP stuff, this is all the new stuff, you want to focus on this. Let's not focus on the other hand, which is about the last 70 years of UFO stuff that's gone on, you know, where the government should be answerable to it. But it's kind of that, well, let's not look there, let's look at this other location now, and this is all this UAP stuff, and it's capturing the eye of so many people because, you know, the government have seemingly got the press behind them in a very organised fashion to disclose material. Nothing's done by chance. You've got newspapers which would never give the time of day to UAP or UFOs, which are seemingly going out and about for this. And it leads me to believe that there's kind of a master plan that's forced here. And I'm hoping that it's heading in the right direction, to be honest with you, and not just another lie somewhere buried away. You know, I'm hoping that we are actually slowly going to get somewhere.
Yeah, there's definitely a blueprint. I'll tell you why. It's not that people couldn't handle the facts of this. It's everyone couldn't handle it. Like you and I can handle it, you know?
Oh, yeah.
But if you get like some of these organized religions where their mind's made up, this place is made, it's God made this, there's nothing else. What happens to those people if like one day per se they land? Like they're going to have pushback. There's going to be riots. They're not going to try. They're going to say it's the devil, you know?
Yeah. It's true. Yeah, you definitely have some fanatical sort of organizations and stuff which will do that. You know,
yeah, I mean, these beings could land and be like, listen, we could cure cancer, we can help you with all your resources, and we can help you become interplanetary, and there will still be people like, nope, that's a devil.
Yeah, it will be. I think it's been bred into us really we always question, it's like beware the Greeks bearing great gifts and stuff, isn't it? It's always been like that. And I don't blame them really on something, because some countries, unlike, the US and unlike the UK, have really had it significantly hard for generations, and they've learned to not trust anyone.
Yeah.
And the problem is that if wherever that first UFO is going to make contact and come down, just as an example, if it lands in a Western country, then there'll be all hell to play.
Yep.
Because all these other countries are all going to say, oh, well, they're into it's the Americans. And
it's part of the UN.
Exactly. So, it's going to spell trouble. And maybe they know that. Maybe that might be the reasons why they do things, on a silence agendas and just go about their business without saying, we're going to be landing on the White House lawn and stuff like that. Maybe that's the reasons why, because I think once that actually happens, all hell's going to break loose in these Middle Eastern countries, and because of the way they believe,
right?
And they're going to say, they're parted with the aliens, then and that's it, so. And they believe, the Americans are the level, don't they, in some of these countries. So, it's going to go hand in hand. I can't see that that's going to be a problem.
If they decide to speak to us as a whole, I would like to imagine they're intelligent enough to go everywhere simultaneously. And
I would hope so.
And they've learned, they've had plenty of time to learn our languages, and they could convey a message simultaneously to everyone. And even then, Steve, people are like, nope, that's a devil. It's the truth. It's sad to say it.
There's no way out. There's no way out of it. We do one way or the other.
Yeah, it's scary,
It really is. But I mean, I think the fact is that, there is work going on in the inner circles of ufology. Now, when we say the inner circles of ufology, the guys who I'm talking with, the Scientific Coalition of European Studies, there's a few other ones, there's a couple of think tanks. They aren't the ones that are going to go and do these lectures at these UFO conferences. It's not going to happen. It's hard enough to get Jacques Vallée to go and even talk at a UFO conference. They consider it as an entertainment side. There's a circus side. It's not for scientific research. I don't want to get part and parcel of this. So it's done in quiet locations and away from sight. But some interesting stuff is taking place, and some proper scientific research is happening in regarding these, what is this phenomenon represent? And one of the areas was the fact that the paranormal attributes that can be associated with this UFO stuff, like Skinwalker, for example. I mean, it's not the ranch; it's the location,
right?
Really. I always wondered how Bob Bigelow went on there when he was doing his investigations with the NIDS team. And luckily, for now, he started coming out and saying that, what it really consisted of, the communications with this phenomena, and that it did have, kind of, in his own words, a sting in its tail. There are people which have been involved in the research there, and they've gone away to have tremendously bad lives, tremendously negative things happening. And Bob is now saying the same thing. He's basically saying, look, I wish I didn't really get too involved in that, though it was interesting at the time, the communications, but it has a sting in its tail. And I was just faced with just one bad thing after another. As soon as I came away from that investigation, I was just faced with one thing after another and another and another. He lost his wife, he lost his dog, he lost his son, he lost his grandchild. It was just pure negativeness to it. And it's not just him.
It's back to what I was saying earlier. I overall think they're benign because they're here to study. But when you go to a place like, I think the geography there is something's interesting about it, whether it be magnetics or whether it be whatever it may be. And so they're investigating as well as we are. Now, you're talking about, I don't care if you're a billionaire times 40. When you're talking about an advanced technology, nothing you're going to do is going to detect them. If they don't want you to detect them or be bothered, sure, I promise you, they'll shut you down, right? I mean, that's what you have to imagine. We're talking about an advanced technology. To the credit of Bob, he did a great job, but he was there to actually uncover facts. Now, this newer group of people they're there for entertainment purposes. And I'm sure, I think there's different degrees and levels. Because did you hear one of the rules? Don't dig on the new show. Don't dig. That's a rule.
Yeah.
And so that being said, tells me they're there for entertainment. They're not there to do a real scientific study. I know the one guy in the geology, he's a real guy, but I can even see the frustration on his face. And that's a show. I feel that's a scripted show, but I could still see the frustration on his face because he is a scientist and he wants to dig and learn. So I think when you have an advanced intelligence observing this area, I have to believe they're like, well, these people are here for entertainment. Who cares? They're not going to dig. They're not going to do it. I mean, I have to think that.
It is entertainment. I mean, he knows that, like anybody who's done enough research, this phenomenon is closely associated to the ground. I mean, there are times when things have been seen on camera and have been lucky to capture them, because on the early days when I was setting up CCTV cameras, this phenomenon was hyper-invasive. It didn't want to be recorded.
Right.
When things were happening in one field, they set the cameras up, then the phenomenon moved to another location. So they go and put the cameras there, and then it move again. And eventually, when they realised they had to buy enough cameras to cover all the fields, it started ripping the wires out. You used to find the cameras had been vandalised up a pole, in the middle of nowhere. How did they get vandalised? Just ripped out all the wires and things. This phenomenon didn't want to get recorded, but occasionally some things were caught, light phenomena. Also, what was interesting was the fact that sometimes, just for about maybe 3-4 seconds, you get this sudden appearance of something as large as a building that seems to be out there in the field. And it seems to phase in and phase out, and as if it's just disappeared into another reality.
Well, that phenomenon is not just by the show either. That's actually been spoken about for a very long time, I've read.
It has, but what's interesting is when you go out to those locations, you can see a physical imprint in the ground of tremendous weight, as if something very, very heavy has been there. So it's seemingly something which materializes, which has physical properties to it. So God knows what it is. I don't know if it's some type of, people say portals and all sorts of things, and maybe so. But it's something that's very old, it's been going on there long before the ranch was even there. But it's not the only ranch. There are other ranches up there. I know at least 2 or 3 other ranches which still have the same type of phenomena which is going on. My team were there in October of 2020, and they came back with footage of the phenomena, UFO stuff and lights in the sky and stuff. But most of it on their report stated that it come from the land. It moved to the outer regions of the ranch, the perimeter. But there was a significant amount of anomalies taking place around the sort of the cliff edges. That seems to be the upwelling of land there. Seems to be a key location. But people are still reporting, phenomena taking place. And what's most concerning is that the people in the vicinity to the ranch, which have been living there now for all their lives, are seemingly ill. Have the effects of radiation.
Huh.
But it's not high amounts of radiation, but you get little bits now and again. But living there over a long period of time is going to cause some physiological problems. And this is what they're finding with the people that live around that area, that they are somehow affected. There's seemingly effects of radiation and unusual sicknesses in that location as well. So that's something else that the science teams are kind of trying to figure out what the hell's going on there, what's causing that.
Yeah, make room for the idea that there's an exhaust there somewhere that's putting that radiation out, right? There could be something below the surface that we're unaware of.
Well, there was a couple of occasions that did actually happen during the show where they had these unusual high amounts of energy readings and they couldn't kind of work out. And then as soon as it appeared, this just disappeared. But I guess if you're living in an environment all your life in there and you're going to get the odd zap now and again, of course it's maybe it's something that does have this residue. It's taking place in that location, is affecting the people over a long period of time. And they really do need to do some proper scientific research into, what's going on there in regarding, the physiological aspects to people who are living there or in the region, should we say, have somehow been adversely affected.
Yeah, because I don't think Bigelow did. I know he did some science there, but it was more for observation purpose, right? For capturing an image.
Yeah, it was observations. Yeah,
Maybe like
but
maybe like a drilling team, right? Like a professional drilling team.
Yeah, they did some little bits. So most of their work considered about communication. I mean, at that time, there was quite a bit of a hype of stuff and the paranormal aspects of this taking place. We already know that there'd been a hype of paranormal stuff that had been reported. You know, people walking through the fields and hearing a conversation above them. You know, I think the original owner stipulated that him and his son was out there one day, and as they're walking through the field, they could hear a conversation between two people, and it seemingly was about 20 foot above them. And they're looking around, couldn't see anything. And in his frustration with what was going on and everything, he shouted up, you know, "I can hear you." And they'd stopped. And then he started laughing, you know. So, you know, this is weird. This is really weird stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's full circle back to what we began with vibrations and the ability to have perception of these things.
Yeah, and it's seeming like the phenomena can perceive us, though. It's like we don't not perceive them, but they certainly perceive us. And I think Bob Bigelow got into a lot of these aspects of communications with some of these, whatever they are, the entities or whatever. There was some work that was being done inside the cabins and communications and, you know, things like that of the more paranormal side, trying to get answers. And it was seemingly that part of the stuff, of the research, had the sting in its tail. So I don't know if they just pressed it too much or whatever.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I mean, again, not to ring the bell again, but more intelligent, more sophisticated. Yeah, I mean, if I have to believe overall they're benign, because I do believe we're under a long-term study for our evolution. And think about it. What might be thousands of years for us, for them, it's like a blink of an eye, because we don't know how they're operating in perception and space-time. We don't know. But if
we don't know. We don't really know how they truly perceive us.
Yeah,
you know, I mean,
if they were going to take us out, I think it'd have been when we were like, I don't know, before we had nukes, definitely.
No, I mean, I don't know if I wouldn't go as far to say that, you know, they're really so caring about the human race, because they're quite happy to sit back and let hundreds and thousands, or if not millions, of people suffer.
Yeah, I mean, I had someone tell me, like, well, what if they're trying to get our resources? I'm like, you know, there's more resources on asteroids and comets by a mile. You know,
yeah.
This is the least resourceful place I could imagine. It's tainted, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they might care about the planet. I mean, that's seemingly. I mean, I'm assuming, you know, that this phenomenon has been here for a long time. I mean, the research that we did went back to 700,000 BC, where the first accounts of some type of serpent people were being worshipped, and apparently were described to be the physical beings. And of course, it all starts with the serpent gods. And of course, as you traverse through the eras, you know, we get some slight differences, but then we get into other things. You know, we start getting. There was a time when the phenomenon didn't have what I refer to as the 10-year mess up, where it didn't really know how or what was to perceive itself. I mean, we have this 10 years. I mean, we went through from the serpent gods and all these other things. Then we had the angelic era, the biblical times, and all that. And then we had the Space Brothers. The Space Brothers turned up. Then but then just before the Greys came into effect, there was this like 10 years of craziness where people were seeing blue aliens, little green aliens, hairy little things, you know, all sorts of different things. It's like, what the hell happened in that 10 years? It was just like went crazy. And then all of a sudden, the Greys were here, 1947 or whatever, you know, it was probably one of the major incidents. And these beings were here. And then you've now got a few variations of them, you know. I mean, apart from about 39 different types of Greys, but now you've got the taller ones, and you know. And it was 10 years there, just like it was crazy.
Well, you know, think about this. Like these again, higher intelligence says, what can we present to these people? That's what's correct for this era. That's different from them, but acceptable at some level. We're not, you know. And then when you get to the space era, it's just universal. We'll use the Greys because no matter where you go in the world, this is an acceptable face for our brand, right? Because again, we're under observation, and the beings controlling those little Greys, they could vary in appearance like we do. Like we vary as humans. We have different races with We have different heights and whatever else, which unfortunately causes us to have more difference. Well, I don't know why we still do that, but the point I make is they had to figure out what's acceptable enough now moving forward. Because I think at some point, like I was saying earlier, they started renting these out to maybe other races. They came and this is our brand, this is our model. It works. We'll upgrade things as see fit, but for right now, this works. I mean, I have to think that.
It does at the moment, but you seem to go through the.
It ain't broken, don't fix it.
Oh, true. Yeah. I mean, some people have asked, what happened to all the Space Brothers? Where's all the Space Brothers gone? I mean, we hear lots of different things, but it seems like that not only does the appearance of these beings alter through eras, but seemingly some of the craft have as well. I mean, it was very befitting for, these, sort of fireballs and tracer fire and rocket type UFOs things seen during the Second World War. We even had, the strange phantom airships, which was seen as well, and it was seen, funny enough, it was seen on the same day in Sacramento and also in Cardiff in Wales over here on exactly the same day, which is very strange. But who knows? I mean, I like to think sometimes that maybe someone just did manufacture some of these airships and just didn't get out there. And this wasn't the first person that manufactured it. It was a guy. It was two.
Yeah, I mean, also keep in mind, humans went from when they first started observing us, went from being wide out in the open, hunter gatherers, to having structure. And then today's we're stacking buildings, we're inside a house. They had to advance their technology so they could further watch us. I mean, they had to make us. Imagine that meeting in the boardroom. Like, all right, well, they're going inside. They have Wi-Fi now and cameras. Anyone has anything at the table, we can start monitoring from the inside. And the answer was simple. We could actually observe them through their own technology because they, cameras everywhere, microphones everywhere in our houses. We made it all too easy,
Absolutely. I think moving forward, though, I think we're going to have to start introducing more of this esoteric type stuff. It's certainly got some elements to it, and I think that was known years ago.
Yeah,
I think it was known long time before the Germans got interested into communications with some type of beings around a seance table, like the German metaphysical group did, and then eventually became the Vril Society, and were channeling information from said aliens from some planet, giving them certain information regarding technology, which was obviously went off to be used by German forces. I think that's not. It didn't just happen then; it's happened prior. And many other times, is seemingly that connection to this UFO phenomena, about manifesting it, about conjuring it in some cases. I mean, I've talked before about conjuring UFOs. I mean, I've been associated with people which did these studies around seance tables to the point where they were communicating with entities which were referring to themselves as interdimensional beings. Occasionally they were being seen, but the manifestation of miniature UFOs were seen, and these were about the size of a dinner plate. They looked exactly like a UFO would be, and shining little lights down and things. These were physical. They were balls of light seen, and these were, you could feel them. You could actually hold your hand out, and you could feel the mass enter onto your hand, and you could cup it and see the light through your fingers. I mean, there's a lot of mysterious, strange things that have been going on in regarding these circles of mediumship and this phenomena being whatever it is. And that also includes the conjuring process. I mean, we've said, look, if we've got 5 mediums around a table and they can conjure this type of phenomenon to come through over a period of time, is really not much difference than conjuring a UFO to be seen in the sky when you got 5 meditators sat in the circle. A bit like the S.E.P program, where they have a ranch and SETI 5, with just Stephen Greer's, where they seemingly will a UFO to appear, and it seems sometimes they appear. So we do know that there's a conscious connection with this phenomena. And I do believe the conjured phenomena is the real phenomena. I've seen it interact in certain ways where I would say, yes, it's the real phenomena. It's not a representation of it. But there's a lot more going on between us and that phenomena than what meets the eye. They're very more associated with our consciousness, I think, than anything. And I think that's where we're heading. Now we're pushing forward into the what are the limitations of consciousness? Is there limitations to consciousness? And I mean, is this their playground? And we're starting to realize that, hang on a second, we are more connected on a conscious level with these things than we ever thought.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Our brain, if you look at you look at a construct of the human brain, it's basically a transmitter. It's a really complex computer that can transmit. Some people have the capacity to do it, through meditation. Other people do it through unknowingly. And I think what's going to happen is when Elon Musk has Neuralink, he won't be the only company to do this. Other companies are going to see this and they're going to obviously jump on board. And then you're going to be able to bridge the gap between conscious and subconscious. And in communicating, it's going to alter everything indefinitely. And I think that's around a time we'll be more aware of other entities, vibrations, and dimensions.
Yeah, maybe it's just a really good time to open up those subjects, which people are doing. Some really interesting, scientific surveys and experiments about observation. We learned a lot just from the dual slit experiment or the double slit experiment when we talk about the phenomena of poltergeist. I mean, we do know that when we actually look at something, it alters because of our observation of it. We argue the point about, well, what's going on in poltergeist disturbances? Because, sometimes you won't ever see something move from its resting point. It's always seen in flight or in movement, and when you lock onto it and you're watching it, it doesn't seem to do anything. It's only when you look away, it seems to manipulate itself somehow. And I was curious to think, I wondered if we're locking it. I wonder if we're stopping the phenomena for acting out because of our observation of it. It's acting differently because of our observation, which means then that, kind of falls hand in hand with the results of the dual slit experiment and stuff, how we somehow manipulate it, somehow change something through the power of observation.
Huh. That's a good point. I mean,
yeah, I'm not aware of anybody. I mean, I've talked to a number of people who've done research it. And when you really get down to the point, really itty bitty stuff, and you say, look, did you see it move in the air? Did you see it move from a stationary point? And most people kind of go, well, no, but I mean, it's either yes or no. Most people aren't. I don't come across people when it really gets down to the nitty-gritty stuff. They saw it move from a standing point. It always seems to be in transit, know. And it's just been explained differently. We saw it move from one point to another. There's just not enough information there to say, did you see it actually move from a resting point or was it in transit? And the people who I talk to all tend to say it is in transit, or it's fallen from the ceiling, or it suddenly launched itself across the room as soon as I took my eye off it. And I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if there's something going on there that restricts the phenomena from doing something, manipulating the object, if it's under observation, like the dual slit experiment. So I thought, maybe it's an area of study. I mean, there's so much stuff that needs to be really probably studied now, which might give us some clues as to, how phenomena is manipulating some of these things.
Yeah, especially when you hear the pilots, when they speak about the behavior when they're observing these things, that's got my attention too, because they did get lock on it and it did stay, not stationary, got to keep in mind they're in flight. But when it zipped off the screen like that, and people don't think it's fast, but when you read the data, that's fast. That what it did there was impossible, right? To our standards anyhow. So
yes.
I think you're right. I think when they know they're being observed, I think they behave slightly differently. Until they're done. Then they're like, all right, we're out. That's until that point comes.
Yeah, I mean, it was I think back in the 80s, the UK, I can't imagine it, but they had actually a shoot-down order for about a year or two on some of the UFOs off the east coast of England. And I thought to myself, okay, well, good luck with that. And it turned out, even though that they did have a few engagements, every time they went to try and get lock on one of these things, it did a crazy maneuver. And the pilots realised, I've stated after a while, that, you know what, we give up because it knew what we were going to do.
Well, yeah, I mean, because they were actively jamming the radars for the jets that they were around. I mean, they were jamming them real time. So they're very aware of our technology.
Oh, I think they stated, one pilot said it was as if they were, they were reading our intent, what we were going to do, and where we were going to do it. So if that is the case, then you know what, they're connected a lot more to the observers. Even the pilots of military aircraft, they're observers. At the end of the day, you might be just stood on the hillside watching this thing, or you're a pilot in the air. You're still an observer. There's sometimes I believe, this conscious connection and an awareness, an awareness of that we're going to put cameras away in the trunk, or, we're suddenly going to do something different, or a pilot's going to do something. I think they're aware. I think they have the capability.
Also, keep in mind, maybe I've said this a lot, and I think it too. Time and space doesn't operate the same for them, right? Especially now, here's the thing. Think about this. If you're vibrating and you're going to appear somewhere, you kind of have to observe where you're going to appear. You can't just appear. Because what if you materialize and become solid inside of a rock? Fail.
Yes.
So you would have to be able to observe where you're going to materialize in advance. At that same notion, when they're going to materialize, they're seeing you and your friends with cameras. They're like, well, not yet. They have equipment out. And then the equipment goes away and then they materialize. In some cases, like where the military is, I have to believe, like the way they were describing it, going from up to down, there's a transport system for them to go beneath surface. But at the same time, I think they're also observing our military. Well, let's see where their capabilities are today. Let's see how they're doing.
It is interesting, yeah. I mean, when you say about that, I mean, from the details that I've read over the years, the UFOs are aware of pretty much all our military capabilities, where our power stations are, where our military bases are. They know. Now, when a country goes, for an example, wants to go and invade another country, what they tend to do is they check out the capabilities of that country first.
Right.
And the first thing they do is that they send covert stuff in to find, where all their military bases are, where's the runways, where's the infrastructure to that country. Because if we want to damage the country, we can ruin it by its infrastructure. If these guys wanted to do first strike, it would be all over within a day. I mean, they know literally every single military base. They know all the places. They're plentiful at demonstrating that, letting us know that they know where our stuff is.
I agree. I think that's a lot of that too. Like, listen, in case you want to think this, here's our capabilities. Don't think it. Here's another thing, Steve. Like you and I, remember that old scenario about the ants? If we see ants and they have a sophisticated society going on, we start observing them. When they build military facilities and nuclear facilities, it's our job to monitor this. Like, we got to see where it is, right? Because that's concerning, right? So we want to observe them. They're a good study. At the same time, we want to be able to closely observe the dangerous aspects to them and how they're going to use it. And how do we, and the event that we have to stop them, because I don't personally think their motivation is to save our planet for resources. Like I said, I think comets and asteroids provide plenty. I think their motivation is don't let them kill each other because it's our study. It's one of our favorite shows. Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, I think it seems to be that is the case. I think that over a long period of time, I think there seems to be enough evidence to suggest that they've interacted with humanity for, I dare to put a year on it, a long, long time. And I think in some cases may have even steered history into certain places. I mean, we talk about these old scriptures from just one example, Alexander the Great. He was besieging these cities. He came across these besiegers, tried to besiege the city, couldn't. And what swoops down from the sky is listed as, fiery shields, which fire like a bolt of lightning at these walls, and these fall. These are 50-foot walls, like the walls of Jericho. I mean, these walls fall to the ground, which allows them to invade and besiege the city. It seems that when you hear about things like this, there was also the Battle of Sixburg, or Castle in France. And what was really interesting is that the phenomena seemingly knew how people how their belief in religion was. This battle was taking place, as besieging this castle, and these two UFOs turn up. And what did they do? They hovered directly over the cross of the church nearby, which was enough to scare the people who were obviously, Christian, to thinking they were doing something wrong, and decided not to besiege the castle. So it's like little things interactions take place.
I could see that. That's something we would do, undoubtedly.
Oh, of course it is.
I mean, I always try to go from the perspective of us. But that is definitely something we don't want to kill each other, man. Let's show them an act of God, whatever we got to do. That makes sense.
Yeah. And you know what? They were clever enough to know. They're clever enough to know that if we hover over the cross over the church, they're going to think that we're something, you know, a religious connotation, and they're going to stop what they're doing. They'll see it as a sign.
It's true. I mean, and then keep in mind when Alexander the Great seen these shields of fire, he doesn't know how to explain artificial light. He's never encountered artificial light.
In fact, he was worried. I mean, they scared the war elephants, his war elephants at the time. But you know, to his advantage, you know, they literally destroyed the wall, allowing him to besiege it. Which means that history is taking a different place there. There's something which has been altered there in history because of the actions of these objects, you know. So maybe that was the whole thing. Maybe they wanted him to besiege the city. Who knows? But there are countless cases like that through history where there seems to have been some type of fiery shields from the heavens or whatever that have seemingly interacted and changed the path of an outcome, you know. And I often think to myself, that's really fascinating.
You got to imagine how interesting we are to watch.
You know what? We must be.
Yeah,
we really must be. The amount of diversity humans have all across the planet, what's going on.
That's why I say to people, they're like, you think they're going to try to save our planet? Like, no, they want to save their favorite channel. Let's be honest, you know, this is their favorite thing to watch. It's anywhere from drama, murder, chaos to Rome. It's just insane. And think about this. What we watch on TV, the most popular thing on TV currently is reality TV. And for them, this whole planet is reality TV. It's
one great big reality TV.
Yeah, it's a documentary. It's a social thing. It's insane. This is an insane place. So yeah, by all means, don't blow each other up because you'll ruin our channel. And they probably got subscribers all over the universe, you know. So
it's a very feasible. You know what? It's the only one probably thing it does probably make sense.
Yeah, I mean, it probably makes the aliens a lot of money. There's people in universes, who knows how far away. They're using the cosmic web as fiber optic cable, and they're charging. And so their motivation, again, is, oh my God, we can't lose this channel. It's amazing. Everything happens.
Yeah, I don't think that they're going to be going anywhere.
Yeah, not at all. I mean, until we get to that point where we have chips in our brain, we're communicating without words, and we remove race from our equation, we remove religion and politics, we start behaving as a species, then we're not really an interesting thing to watch anymore. And why not join them, you know? And then they'll tell us, like, well, now we got to go find a new planet with people like you so we could all watch again.
Exactly. Yeah, I know. I mean, I think we are advanced. I think there seem to be some stages of advancement.
Yeah.
Now we can look back into our past and say, look, you know what? Now we really are finding anomalies regarding where the human chromosomes come from and how we came to be is all very questionable now, which people are being a little bit more alerted to. But then there's the continuation. There's the possibility of that, you know, of slow genetic alteration in humanity. You know, there are people, researchers, which are just specifically looking into that and seeing how possibly we may change as over a period of time, genetically advancement. Who knows? I mean, something has been going on for a long time. They seem to be conducting their experiments with humans and that sort. And if they are, the initial thing was that we were a creation of some sort, because certainly the evolutional concept does not fit whatsoever. They don't really want to go there. They don't like
I mean, we're I'm right there with you. I think there's an architect behind it all. You know what I mean? It just, there's too many similarities from plants to us to the space to universe. There's too many similarities. It's a universal thing. And like I said, if it's not broken, don't fix it. So if something constructed something and it works for like down the line, why bother with it, you know? So
exactly. So where we're heading is, I mean, we've done like now 6 years in Project Doorway. We still continue. We've still got some more research to do. Our next part of studies is we have to wait to the solstices and the equinoxes because we want to conduct frequency experiments inside resonance chambers during and on the frequency, human vocal frequencies that can be generated in the resonant chamber, which is designed for it, and also at the same time we bring down that terahertz frequency from the rising or the setting sun during solstice or equinox into the flood chamber, into the passageway. So we want to see what can be done. We have done some first experiments in this kind of field, and what was interesting is that we had some audio recorders which seemingly picked up sound which we couldn't hear at the time. It picked up like a drum beat. It picked up like a beat, a sound. And we don't know where that was coming from. We don't know if it's coming from some other side or whatever, but we just don't know. So we have to conduct some more experiments in some of these key locations, which we believe are still active ancient chambers. But we've got to wait for the right time. We've got to wait for the right time of the year where the terahertz frequency is present in the passageway.
I'm super interested to hear about that. I really am. As you know what, Steve, I know we're going to be doing this a lot. Before we close, we're past 2 hours. Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly mention about we've got a big convention in the UK taking place on the 24th of June in the summer in the UK, which is known as the Chariots of the Gods convention.
Ooh, that's interesting.
And we've got all the big names from the ancient aliens here, Giorgio Tsoukalis, Eric von Däniken, and all those sort of things. And that's going to be taking place over 3 days, June 24th, 25th, 26th, in Blackpool in the UK, which is kind of the UK's Las Vegas in the sense of speaking. But we decided that we were going to stretch our legs and try and go for an expo, which is a little bit different. And it's seemingly going on well, doing really well. And that ties in with a new theme park, which is being built right next door to where the convention centre is. It's going to take about 3 years, and it's known as the Chariots of the Gods theme park, which is all about education and entertainment, and it's about introducing the subject of the UFOs, ancient mysteries, and that sort of thing to the younger generation. So it's some exciting times to come, certainly. But of course, we'll be keeping people noted more on that. There's quite a few people coming over from the US, obviously, which are already interested in attending. But like I say, it's not until June of this year.
Well, I'm going to definitely have you on for post that, during that. We'll have some summaries. We'll keep the listeners apprised to it.
Absolutely, Adam. Yeah, thanks very much.
In the meantime, Steve, it's been an absolute pleasure again. We will definitely do this again.
Wonderful. Well, thanks very much, Adam. It's been great to have on.
All right. Have a good evening.
And yourself.